All right, we're live, y'all. How's it going? So I know that this chat is going to get a little crazy tonight. So make sure that if you have actual questions, like really specific questions about AP World, that you drop it in where it says ask a question. Okay. So I'm going to kind of introduce myself and, what we're doing here. But I'm not going to be able to follow the chat too well because there's a lot of you guys in here. And then also just, please make sure that you are, this is a public chat, so let's just stay, all right. So anyways, all right, let me share my screen here. Okay, so one of the things that you can do if, as I'm going to get into this, I highly recommend that you take notes. Obviously it's not mandatory. I'm not going to check to see if you took notes, but it's really useful. And whoops, sorry, hang on. All right, so if the chat itself is distracting to you, you can hide it. So I would suggest doing that if you're like, I just want to focus on what's going on. So don't worry, you don't have to follow the chat. So, as we cut through this, this is Fiveable. So Fiveable is trying to help you get fives, right? So I'm trying to help you pass these exams. The reason why I started Fiveable is knee deep in college loans from 10 years ago. And I don't want you to have the same issue, and nobody else is trying to fix this for you. So I can help you, fight that with college credit from AP exams. So tonight is going to be all about the rise and fall of empires. So I'm curious if you guys could just put in the chat a topic, like what are you studying right now? Don't tell me a chapter, don't tell me a period, tell me like specific topics. What is it that you are reading about in your textbook, or what are you taking a test on? What did you learn today in class? All right, so we've got religions, Han Dynasty, Rome, patriarchy in the classic empires. Good. Rome and Han, Roman decline, Mayan, Christianity. Awesome. So you guys are right in the same spot. Good. And so remember, if you have a question, please just put it where it says ask a question. If you're watching on a desktop, you can see that below the screen. If you're watching on your phone, I think you have to just like click something to see that. But that will allow me to, I can answer them a lot easier here. So I wish I could mark this as answered. Yeah, so I'll be able to go through, and I'm going to, take questions throughout the whole time. So you can ask a question about anything that you're studying, and I will be sure to help you out. So if you are looking for resources, I'm going to do a quick shameless plug here. So Think Fiveable on YouTube is youtube.com/thinkfiveable. And we literally have 993 subscribers right now. And so I would love to hit that 1,000 mark tonight because this is a new channel and you guys are awesome and I'm helping you guys out. And so on the YouTube channel, I have key concept reviews for all of AP World. So that's 19 videos that tell you exactly what you have to know for the test. So you can get those and other videos that I'm going to be posting soon, youtube.com/thinkfiveable. So cool. We're at 996 already. So 4 more of you could go and subscribe. That would be excellent. All right. So period 2 is 3 key concepts. It's religion and culture, states and empires, and classical trade. So I'm doing them a little bit out of order, but I kind of like this order of things. It kind of, I don't know, I think it kind of helps to understand it a little bit. So just remember, y'all, I'm going to stop every few slides or so and check the questions below. So if you have a question, make sure it's there because I can't follow the chat. So if you want to hide the chat, if you're on a desktop, if you kind of put your mouse over it, there's a little arrow. And if you are on just minimize it. You can there's a little arrow that pops up. You can kind of minimize it. And if you're on a phone, you can do the same thing. You can minimize it. So no worries. And it's fine if you guys chat with each other, but I'm not going to really look at the chat. it's also distracting for me. So if you have a question that you want me to answer, put it in the question bin, and you can upvote each other's questions, and I'll make sure to answer the ones that are upvoted the most. And, I'll really get to all of them mostly. All right. So why do empires rise? This is a popular question for short answer questions, and you could see a long essay question about this. Like, why do empires come to power? So I've kind of boiled it down to 5 reasons. There are other reasons too, and there's obviously exceptions, right? So if you watch Crash Course, you know that the Mongols tend to be an exception. But there's really only a handful of reasons of why a state would come to power. So we're going to kind of talk about each of them, and I'm going to give you an example of them after. So the first reason is military conquest. States and empires come to power because they conquer territory, right? So it tends to be that the more land you have, the more powerful you are, right? Or at least that is how people thought for a long time. So, military conquest is one of the ways that a state comes to power, that empires come to power. And we see that with empires throughout history. This is not something that's new. It's not something that's only for the ancient or classical empires. All of them had some sort of conquest, some kind of military expansion, right? Even the United States, right? Like the United States starts as 13 colonies and expands to the entire coast. Some of that through military action, some of it through diplomacy or purchasing land that I guess someone else owned. But military conquest, as you're expanding, you are increasing your power, your influence. The second is charismatic leaders. So you can see almost every empire or civilization that's existed, that's come to power, that's been an established power, had some leader that was really charismatic, that or was beloved by their people, right? Charismatic doesn't necessarily mean good. Doesn't mean that they're a good person, right? But they are a good speaker. They're good at captivating audiences. They're saying the right things. They're saying them at the right time, and they're getting people to rally behind their own, causes. And so obviously, in this chat, you got Stalin over here, right? You've got a charismatic leader. You've got someone who is reining up the power. Without a leader, you don't really have that central hub, that central figure. Why expand if you don't have someone telling you to do that? Number 3 is a complex bureaucracy. So for an empire to be an empire, right? If you're going to conquer lands, you have to be able to keep them under your control. For any empire, for the Roman Empire, for the Han Dynasty, for Gupta, for any of the civilizations then and later, if you're going to take over all this land, how, as the Roman Empire, how do you make sure that the people who live in Northern Africa, even though they're part of the Roman Empire, how do you make sure that they think of themselves as part of Rome, that they are paying taxes, that they are part of your society? In order to do that, you need a bureaucracy. Last week, I defined bureaucracy, and I'm going to do it again because this is one of the most important terms that I think is oftentimes misunderstood. So a bureaucracy, think about a bureau, right? Like your drawer, a dresser where you put clothes in, right? You've got different drawers, and in each drawer, you put some kind of different, clothing, right? You've got your shirts in one, you've got pants in another. It's the same thing with governments, with bureaucracy. With bureaucracy, each drawer is a different, facet of life. You've got education, you've got, the interior, right? The environment, you've got defense, you've got, treasury, you've got state, you've got veterans affairs. You can have a lot of them. And the United States has a lot of them. We've got, a lot of different departments, and this is true for the United States today, and it was true for all these classical civilizations. Rome had a very complicated bureaucracy. They have a system of taxes and voting and all these different things. And so that is something that you need. States can't come to power if they can't maintain their power, right? Like when you study the Aztecs, when you study the Incas, any of the Chinese dynasties, all of them have very complicated bureaucracies because it takes a lot to run an empire. Number 4, you've got to have some way of maintaining your wealth. And usually that has to do with trade. So in times when there are stable empires, trade thrives. So one of the things that you should remember is that the trade networks are massive during the classical era, and then they decline because the empires themselves decline. And then they come back when you have the Islamic empires that come back and the Mongols. And so in the classical era, you have trade and you have wealth because you have these empires to manage it. And wealth and commerce, it allows you to become powerful, right? Like as an empire, you can expand your territory, you can have a charismatic leader, you can have a bureaucracy, but if you can't maintain your wealth and get wealthier, then you're not going to keep your power, right? Like you've got to be able to continue that commerce. And then number 5, you've got to have superior technology, right? And that's part of it has to do with military conquest, but the other piece of that is like wealth and commerce. Like the better your technology is, the more likely you are to remain in power. So these are like these 5 things. Like if you haven't written these down, I really recommend that you do that because it's likely that you will get some kind of question, on an upcoming exam, even like if you have a unit test on unit 2 of like either asking you like why empires rise or to compare the rise of empires. And if you're going to compare the rise of empires, more likely than not, any one of these 5 things is a similarity between any empires, between, if you're comparing Rome and Han, same thing, right? And then where they become different is sometimes one of these things isn't the focus. They're not trying to like conquer a lot of land, or they don't have that like one charismatic leader. Like that's possible. All right. So just as an example here, like the rise of the Roman Empire. So one of the things to remember is that Rome is in 3 different parts, right? There's the Roman kingdom, then there's the Roman Republic, and then there's the Roman Empire. While all 3 of them are part of world history, you're really going to focus mostly on the Roman Empire. So the Republic itself was important, and there's some terms and things that come out of that. The kingdom isn't going to come up almost at all on the exam. The empire is like really the important piece. So why does the Roman Empire rise? Why does it become so powerful between like 30 BC, I think is around that time, to like 476 CE, right? It's like, why does it come to power? And then we'll talk about why it collapses. So, like we talked about, conquest. The Romans expand throughout the entire Mediterranean, and that expansion allows them to rise to power, right? Like if you are expanding, you are putting more people in your empire, and those people are going to work for your society, right? Like they are your economy, right? Like having more people, having more land gives you more resources, gives you more labor. So because the Romans expanded throughout the entire Mediterranean, like they had all the lands around the Mediterranean Sea, they were able to rise to power. Second is charismatic leaders. The first emperor is Augustus. Augustus was massively charismatic, right? Like he's able to combine this empire that was collapsing as a republic, but able to establish it as an empire, as a new form of government that was strong and able to grow from that. Third is a complex bureaucracy. Rome had a massively complicated bureaucracy, centralized government. Make sure you know the difference between centralized and decentralized. Centralized is when there is like one city, there's a capital city, there's one hub, right? This is where things run. Decentralized is like there isn't really one place that's in charge, right? Like the Mongols are decentralized. But the Romans are very centralized. They've got Rome, right? Everything is established in Rome, and they will administer the entire empire from there. Third or fourth is wealth and commerce. So because of the Silk Roads, because they established the Silk Roads, you've got a lot of trade coming into Rome. And so Rome is able to establish itself as an empire, as a powerful empire, because it's such a big part of the trade networks there. And then finally is their superior technology. They've got weapons, they've got infrastructure, they've got things that are better than everyone else. So, all right, so I'm going to get into the fall of empire in just a second. Let me just check out the questions here. So how long is this? 40 minutes to 1 hour. Let's see. All right, I'll go into that after. Let's see. Let's see if there's anything. Whew. All right, yeah, there's a lot of questions here. Do you just review for AP World History? No, we've got a lot of subjects, so I'll go into that a little later. All right, so let's go back to the slides. Okay, so why empires rise, right? So these are the 5 things I told you already. So again, if you didn't write these down, this is your last shot. So the slides themselves will be available for Fiveable members. So those will be, and I'll talk a little bit more about Fiveable and how to become a member later. So, consider these 5 reasons. They're going to come up for you, not just in period 2, not just in the classical era, but in the post-classical era, in the early modern era, throughout the entire study of world history. This is why empires rise. All right, why do they fall? So there's a lot more reasons of why they fall. And I have to say, when I was putting together this list, it comes from an article that I had used for a couple of years now, and I'll share the link with you in a second. But basically, I don't know. I couldn't help but feel like a lot of these things seem true today. And I don't know. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not someone who's like, I'm not going to get into like current events and politics right now, but I think what's important is as you're studying empires falling in the classical era, this isn't so removed, like this happens in modern times. Like we're not immune to any of this. We live in the world just like the Romans did, and I think that's important. And you think about, the people of the classical era, they're no different than me and you. We're not smarter than them, right? Like we should be able to learn from their mistakes, but at the end of the day, like this is how things play out. These patterns of history are more than just history, right? Like history is happening. So these are the 10 reasons. And as we go through it, we're just going to do one at a time. I'm going to show you some examples of why empires fall. So the first reason is succession of power. So if there's a problem in finding who comes to power next, an empire can fall. Typically, it's not like one of these things will topple an empire. It's usually a combination of all 9 of these things. Sometimes it's all of them. Sometimes it's some of them, but it's usually not just one, right? So succession of power can cause problems, can cause, conflict over like who comes to power next. So for example, in the Hellenistic empires, Alexander, the Great, Alexander the Great, he doesn't have an heir. So after Alexander dies, there isn't really anyone to take over for him. Right, like he didn't really establish any system of who will be in power and who will be in power after me. He's pretty young, so I don't think he was thinking about that. And so because of that, the Hellenistic empires fall. They don't last. So there's no one to succeed him. The Mongols were kind of similar. I know that's a little bit later, but it's kind of the same. They're not in power for that long. It's only like 100, 150 years, and it's not clear of who should be in power next. And so empires fall. Same with the Romans. The Romans were oftentimes disputing between themselves, like who is in power next, who's the next emperor, and this can lead to coups. right? And so people overthrow things, and it's because they don't, like, if you don't believe that the person that's in power should be in power, then you don't respect them. They need like a mandate, right? Like, your people have to believe that you should be in power, whether it's because they believe a god chose you, or a vote, or you're the son of this other guy. There's a lot of reasons, but they have to agree that you are the one that should be in power. And so if they disagree, an empire can fall. Number 2, political corruption. Okay, so this is a big one, right? Like, and this is something we see across the board in every empire. This happens towards the end, where those in power become corrupt. They become, like, greedy, or abusive with their power, or they're just putting their friends and their family in power, and you end up getting this like subset of the culture that continues to be in power, but people are frustrated by them. And so some examples of that would be like in the Han Dynasty. That corruption can then provoke rebellion, right? So if the government is corrupt and embezzling money, or just putting themselves in charge of things, or anything like that, then people will rebel. So like an example of that is the yellow turban rebellion. Let's see. Okay, so the yellow turban rebellion is in the Han Dynasty. That's what provokes that rebellion, is that the government is corrupt and people will rebel because they are upset by that. So that is number 2. Number 3, economic inequality. So the lesson here is like when the empires are rising, as they rise to power, as they expand, as they're trading, as they're gaining wealth, people are getting rich, right? And other people aren't. And the more inequality there is, right, the wider that gap is, the worse it is for the empire, because what you have is frustration. And honestly, a lot of empires, a lot of rebellions have happened because of just a lack of food, right? Like the lesson for this one is like, feed people. Like if you ever just go and you start your own empire, make sure that people are fed, because people who are hungry will rebel. Like people are trying to stay alive, And so economic inequality is a big issue where, if you have high taxes, if you're taxing your people too much, revolts can happen. And sometimes it's like you're taxing people because expanding the empire costs a lot of money, but then people within the empire don't want to pay those taxes. So now you're caught between, how do we pay for this, and how do I keep everyone happy? So taxes have to be at this like happy place. If they're not, people revolt. People don't want to pay taxes. They don't want to pay taxes that are too high, right? Like people don't mind paying taxes, but not if they're too much. Sometimes tax evasions leave the government broke. So if you've got an elite class that is not paying their taxes, they're getting away with it, then the government's not going to make enough money, and they're not going to be able to pay for the things. The other issue is just not being able to actually collect the taxes. The Gupta Dynasty had this issue. So it's like, you have all these people, you need to collect your taxes. If you don't have a system in place to actually do that, this is where you need that bureaucracy, right? You've got to have a system to collect the taxes. Then if you're not doing that well, you're not going to succeed. You're not going to last. Another piece with economic inequality is just food, like I talked about. People when they're hungry are going to rebel, especially if they see wealth in the upper class. Like when you get to the Atlantic revolutions, then you are definitely going to be talking about this, right? Like this is a big deal here. The lack of bread, right, in France. Like people rebel. So economic inequality. All right, number 4. Number 4 is ethnic tensions. So when you are expanding as an empire, you are putting more and more people underneath your rule, right? And like if you think about the Roman Empire in the Mediterranean, let me just Roman Empire. Oops. Let me just show you. I didn't pull this up earlier. So if you look at the Roman Empire, here, this is a good one. You know, they have a ton of area, but the people that live up here are far different than the people who live here, and they're different than the people who live here, and the ones that live here. They have different values, different histories, different cultures, belief systems, you know, social norms. And so the more expansive you get, the more diversity you have. But if that diversity is not represented in the government, in all the different like ways of life, then people rebel. Another problem with that too is that minority groups could side with like outsiders, right? So if these people over here are like, yeah, we're part of the Roman Empire, but we don't feel Roman, you know, they're doing their own thing, then other people can get them to be on their side. And now you've got a problem, you know, like it's not just a rebellion, it's like it's invasion. And so, you know, this is like this is one of the big reasons, is that if you have tensions between the people, they could fight each other, but then they also could side with someone else. So ethnic tensions, you know, so like I said, minorities are ready to join the outsiders. The Mauryan dynasty had a lot of trouble with uniting India. India is a massive territory, you know, like don't think of it as a small place. It's huge. And in India, there's a lot of different cultures. There's different languages. I don't even know how many languages are spoken in India. Does anyone know how many languages? A lot. And so let's see. There's a lot. So how do you form an empire in India that takes everyone's interests into account? It's tough. And same thing with, you know, the Romans, the Aztecs, they have these different regions that care about different things. And it's really hard to actually have a society where, you know, everyone's opinions are heard, everyone's being taken care of, when you have so many different interests. People are just different. People live in different places. They believe in different things. All right, number 5. Number 5 is a decline of the martial spirit. So what does that mean? It means that martial spirit is basically like people are willing to fight for your country. So in order to expand your empire, you know, you have to conquer different territory. You need a military to do that. You need people who are willing to go fight for you, right? Like that leader has to convince the people that they should join the army or force them to join the army, but they have to be willing to fight and they have to care about it, right? You can't force someone to be a good soldier. They have to be willing to do it. And so if that spirit is lacking, then you got a problem, right? People have to be willing to fight and to defend your empire. So like in Rome had to recruit these like unreliable mercenaries, and they weren't good fighters, and they had to pay them, and it was costly, it was expensive. And so they were already having problems with keeping the empire afloat, but now they can't. How do you defend yourselves, right? If nobody in Rome is willing to fight for Rome, well, then Rome's not going to exist, you know? Like people have to be willing to join the military and to continue it and willing to die for their country, for their empire, if it's going to last. Seems kind of intense, but another thing that was kind of interesting, Ashoka, who's in the Mauryan dynasty, Ashoka is Buddhist, right? And so part of the reason why Buddhism spreads so much when it does is because of Ashoka, because he converts to Buddhism and then advocates for it. But his emphasis on pacifism, on being peaceful, actually was one of his downfalls, because then you have all these people who don't want to fight, not because they don't believe in the empire, but because they don't believe in fighting. And so if you have all these people who don't believe in fighting and someone attacks you, what do? And so that's one of the reasons why they fall. So let's see. Okay. All right, number six. Number six is moral decline. This is a really hard one to define and especially to measure. Like a lot of these are really hard to measure. Like you can't really tell, like it's hard to like be quantitative about it. But basically this is talking about people's like, um, the willingness of people to like do good for each other and whether or not they think each other is doing that. And so what you see is like in Rome, you started to get like more and more like self-indulgence. Like they weren't really about helping each other. They're more about helping themselves. And that can be a problem. In the Han Dynasty, same thing. You've got these like upper class that's just completely extravagant. And it's, kind of a problem because it's connected to like inequality, but it's just about like, I don't know, the like morality of the empire is just lacking. And same thing with Ashoka. Ashoka actually appointed morality officers, like people to keep communities moral. Now, I don't know about you, but if you have to appoint a morality officer, things might not be so good. Like if someone has to stand there and tell you to be a good person, like, I don't know. So that's a problem. Okay, number 7. This one, I find this one super interesting. So escapist religion. So this is talking about like religions of salvation. Essentially, a religion of salvation is one that focuses on the afterlife. So Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism doesn't really do that. Judaism focuses more on like current life, but like Christianity is a great example, right? Like there's a huge focus on, the afterlife, on going to heaven. It's the same thing with Islam. And so what happens is when you have these religions of salvation, and Buddhism and Hinduism are also great examples of these. People are focused on what will happen to me after this life. So if you're living in Rome in 450 CE, like things aren't good. Things aren't great. A lot of these things are true, right? You've got inequality, you've got tensions, you've got corruption, you've got all kinds of stuff. And if you're looking around and you're like, all right, things aren't good. If you're Christian in Rome, you're at that point going to focus more on the after. Well, things aren't good now, so let me just make sure that I'm a good person so that I will get into heaven, but I can't affect change on a massive scale. So what happens is that as these escapist religions spread, they actually weaken these empires. Like some historians have argued that the spread of Christianity is one of the reasons why Rome falls, right? So we're going to talk more about the religions next week, but you have Christianity as a religion. It becomes a like formal religion within Rome after the Edict of Milan, right? And so Edict of Milan makes it legal, and then I forget who like makes it the official religion of Rome. And so some historians have argued that decision actually led to the fall of Rome because people will focus more on their afterlife rather than this life. So, Rome, you're seeing that with Christianity. Maurya Dynasty, you're seeing that with Buddhism. Han Dynasty, same thing with Buddhism, right? Like that is contributing to the fall of the dynasty. All right, number 8 is outside invasion. Outside invasion is kind of like the last straw, and it happens to almost every empire that falls, and it's sort of like the last thing that will happen, right? Once the empire itself is weakened economically, politically, socially, culturally, then outsiders can invade it pretty easily, right? So you've got, in Rome, you've got the Germanic tribes that will invade. In Han, you got the Xiongnu. Honestly, the lesson here is to treat the nomads well, right? Because the nomads will come knocking if your empire is weakened. You were powerful. People want what you have, and now you can't defend yourself. That's a problem. Okay, and then the last one is costly technology. So I think maybe this one shouldn't have been number 9. This one should have been before, but as you're building monuments and infrastructure and roads and walls and weapons to defend yourselves, like these things are expensive and you have to be able to pay for them. So you have to have taxes, you have to have people willing to do that. And all of these things can just become too much. And then it becomes like, you can't afford to maintain them. And so they'll fall apart. And so some of the examples of that is like the Great Wall of China, the Roman roads, the aqueducts, all of these things are costly. It costs a lot of money to start building them, to actually build them up. It costs a lot of money to maintain them, right? Like you don't just build roads, you have to keep them functioning, and that costs money. So when, that's going to put a drain on the treasury, on the society, and let's see. And if you can't keep up with that, then, that's a problem. So, all right. So those are your 9 reasons why empires fall. I'm going to head into the questions right now. So, definitely post your questions in there. I'm going to spend some time talking about the answers to your questions. And then you also can upvote each other's questions so I can get a sense of like which ones that are the most important to you. So if you just take a minute, look at the questions, they're, if you're on a desktop, they're just below the screen. If you're on a, what's it called, a phone, then they are also below the screen. Okay, I don't need to share my screen anymore. So, all right, so let's look at these questions. Can I upload the Google Slides? So the Google Slides will be uploaded to Fiveable. So I want to talk a minute about how you can access the Google Slides, but those will be available for Fiveable members. All right. Greeks and Roman. Oh, that's what you're focused on. Greek history is what you're confused on. Okay. And so Chris Clancy, thank you so much for answering this. This was, so Greek history is not like a single unit. It's not, not like one thing. It's more of like many countries within that peninsula. You've got like Athens, you've got Sparta, but like when you study like Greek history, you also can think of the word Hellenistic. That's like Alexander the Great, right? So Hellenistic is just anything having to do with Greek culture. Okay. How did the Mediterranean trade network change when it changed from Phoenician control to Roman control? All right, thanks for answering this. The biggest change will be where the goods are ultimately being shipped to, as a shift from Eastern Mediterranean. So that's the biggest change, is where it will shift to. Okay, so so I've talked through the actual like fall of empires. I'm going to spend some time answering questions now. And so, the replay itself will be here. Like as soon as I hit end broadcast, this actual like link will become the will become the replay. Sorry, I'm like losing words. And so if you, after this weekend, so just a little like explanation of Fiveable. So at Fiveable, we're working really hard to help you guys pass these exams. And so one of the things that we want to do is to really like reward students who are thinking ahead and thinking about, the spring, because when it comes time for April, for May, the stress, the drama is like intense. And so there's a button below. It says replays and future live sessions. So all of this month in September, all of our live reviews were free. If you're not yet a Fiveable member, the replays and the future live sessions, you'll need to become a member to access those. The slides as well will all be posted there. And so what we're doing is we have like a really early bird fall special. And so we've changed our like pricing. And it's just like a one-time thing now. So it's not like a monthly thing or recurring. It's like one time. And so right now until October 1st, it's $15 for the whole year in AP World. And so if you're taking other classes, we have other ones too. And it's like less if you have more. And so $15 for AP World, like you're not going to get any type of tutoring that's anywhere near this cheap. So you can click that link. It's replays and future live sessions, and you can snag that early bird special, because once that's gone, it's going to keep going up throughout the whole year, because kids are procrastinators, and then they all show up at the same time, and then we're going to have to hire more teachers to help you guys out. So come in now and you'll lock in your price. Okay. How and why did the Greek Empire fall? Just quick shout out to Chris Clancy for answering all these questions, because it's super helpful. Yeah, so the how and why the Greek Empire fell, you can actually read it in the comment below. There's a whole paragraph there, which is awesome, about how the Greek Empire fell. All right. How did slaves and cultivators help develop and maintain an empire? It's all about economics, right? So, and if you're going to build an empire, you have to be able to build all that infrastructure and build, you know, like that bureaucracy has to be maintained. The trade networks have to be maintained. And so a lot of these empires rely on a lot of these empires rely on slave labor to do that, because it's cheap, right? And so for a lot of them, like slaves in, just as a quick note, slaves in Rome and Persia, they weren't based on race like they are in the Americas later on. They're based on like class and landowning and citizenship. So a lot of the slaves come from like prisoners of war. And so that's an important thing to keep in mind. What are coups? A coup is short for coup d'etat. So it's literally just overthrowing the government. So it can be violent. It doesn't have to be violent. Sometimes coups can just kind of happen behind closed doors, where like a military leader, I guess that's like a junta, but yeah, so like a coup is just an overthrow of the government. So it could happen where you have, you know, just like people just kind of doing it behind closed doors, or it could be an entire like rebellious overthrow. And so it happens across history. You'll see this happen a bunch of times. Let's see. How important do you think it is to know specific dates versus general time periods? So actually, I'm going to be sending you guys, all of you, for registering. I wrote out it's like an ultimate guide for AP World, and in it I actually have the most important dates that you should know. However, for AP World, you don't actually have to know any dates, not a single date. You can do well and not remember any specific date. You really should know the general time periods, though. Like, and I think in world history versus US history or European history, I think we use our like time periods more because we're just studying more time. So if you know classical era, if you know post-classical era, those are really important. It's also really important for you to know like a general timeline of events so that you can do cause and effect. So that's a really important piece. Like, you need to know that some things happen before others. You don't necessarily need to know the date of them, but you need to know the order of events. So if I were you, I would really study the order of events rather than the dates themselves. Okay. The Mayans, their political parts, not sure what that means. So Brooke, if you can just comment on your own question, that would be better. Okay, I'm gonna delete this one. I already answered it. Delete. Why didn't the empire hunt down all the religions then? Were religions too powerful to shut down? So yeah, I mean, the thing is, like, I don't think that Rome knew then that Christianity might be a reason why they fall, right? Like, it's something that we know now looking back, but they don't necessarily know then. So it's not like the religions, like the religion also had become a big part of politics. Like, they became very connected. And so, you know, the emperor would think of himself as a Christian. And so he's not going to like shut down Christianity. But what like happens inevitably is that people started to care more about the religion than the state. And so that becomes a problem when you're like, will you fight for Rome? And people are like, like, I don't need to, right? So that's a big problem. So yeah, and then the other comments here is like, if you prohibit a religion, those who practice it get stronger, right? So like, it's just, yeah, the biggest thing is like, they don't know then that that's going to be a reason why it falls, but it does weaken the empire. Description of the Mayans, political, economical. Oh, okay. I'm not going to be able to do a full description of the Mayans right now, but I'll come back to that. Did moral decline occur before the rise of religion? No. So moral decline happens. It happens at any point, right? Like a lot of things can trigger that, and it's hard to even define that because then you have to define what's moral. I think that it happens in relation to religion because religion helps us to define morality, right? And so I think, what you see is like the religions themselves, they do spread in this time period. And so you can't really separate morality from the spread of religions. They kind of happen at the same time. And so by the end of the classical era, that like moral decline that happens is in relation to what had been before, right? All right, let's see. Define bureaucracy. Yeah, so it's just how things, it's like apply it to the US. Think about like our cabinet, right? Like we've got departments for all types of different like administrative things that have to be run. We have education, we have security, we have defense, we have, interior, and we have all these different departments, treasury. And then there's someone in charge, there's a secretary in charge of each department. And each of those things has to work, right? Like you have to like administer all those different pieces. And so for any society to be like successful, once it's really big, it kind of has to be bureaucratic. And so that's kind of how to explain it. AP style multiple choice question strategies. Okay, so I'm going to do a lot more sessions on multiple choice strategies. So this is something that will obviously come up throughout the whole year. And we're going to do a lot of practice ones together. And so, like I said before, if you're not already a member of Fiveable, I know a lot of you guys might already be members because of your teacher giving you a code, and that's awesome. So all the students within Fiveable are going to get a lot of practice on multiple choice. And so one of the best suggestions I can give is, exactly what's here. When you look at the stimulus, look at the like facts about it. Look at the sourcing. Look at the date, the place, and like the specific like person that's writing it, and place it in your timeline, right? So remember I talked about you don't necessarily need to know dates, but you need to know the order of events. So if you get a document and it's then going to ask you a set of questions, look specifically at when was this document written, who wrote it, and just the basics of the sourcing, and then look at the questions. Because a lot of times you don't actually even need to read the full document to answer the questions. I'm not saying skip the document. Look at what the document is, look at the title of it, and then look at the questions. If the question then says like asking about the tone of the document, then go back in and read it. But if it's not, then you might be able to answer it without. So you can save yourself time by doing that. So that's one suggestion that I'll give. How long is this broadcast? Already answered that. All right, let's see. Yep, so everything is recorded. Is there any way you can go live around 6? Well, hopefully this This timing is okay. What is inequitable economic burden? So it's similar to economic inequality, but it means that the different classes have different burdens. So based on like taxes, so it's all relative. So when you have when you're taxing your society, the people who are like more poor, how much are they paying in taxes relative to how much they have, and then how much are like rich people paying in taxes relative to what they have. So, you know, both of those things matter. Like people who are super wealthy, if you know, they have to be, do they have an equal burden? Are they paying, you know, 30% of what they have in taxes, or are they paying less because they have a lot more? So that's what that's what it's talking about with inequitable burdens. So when you have a society that is not equitable in terms of economic burdens, that's a problem. So that means that's where you start to get like revolts, because you have, you know, like people who are paying a bigger share of what they actually have. And so you got to keep things more equitable. How much did the growth of trade impact the growth and development of empires? A lot, right? So like trade is what makes these societies rich. It gives them like power. It gives them more goods, access to more resources. And so it's kind of like a chicken and egg thing though, right? You need a strong empire to have strong trade, but you need strong trade to keep your empire strong. So kind of like, you know, which comes first. But they impact it a lot. Yeah, this question about Jesus spreading Christianity more than his apostles is more about faith and religion. It's not necessarily, I'll start answering this one. It's not necessarily a question about AP World, but in terms of AP World, Christianity spreads because of trade, because of missionaries, because of conquest, right? Like those are like three big reasons as to why Christianity spreads. And it's the same reasons as to why Buddhism spreads and why Islam spreads. Like those are your three main reasons. And we're going to talk about that more next week when we do religions. But, you know, for the most part, religion is spread through trade networks because people bring their ideas. It's spread through missionaries because people are literally going out to spread it, right? These are religions that proselytize. So they're specifically trying to spread. Whereas like Hinduism or Judaism are not proselytizing religions. They're ethnic religions. And so it's harder to convert, and they don't have like missionaries that go out and spread the religion. But like with these three, you do. Done. Can I talk about how trade affected an empire socially, politically? Yeah, that I'm going to really go into in 2 weeks when we do trade. But for the most part, you know, when you have trade, you have a spread of ideas, you have a spread of belief systems, of resources, of what's it called? Inventions, technology. And so these things all impact, they all impact the actual, you know, empire, right? Like they having new technologies makes it so that you can make more things. Having new ideas, the spread of religions, right? So when we talked about why religions fall, or sorry, why empires fall, you know, you can see like a lot of those things happen because of trade, right? Like, you know, technology being costly, like you're building things up because you want to continue trading. The, you know, outside invasions, all of it, right? Like trade can impact all of those things. All right. What are deities? Deities are gods, right? So deity is just another word for god or goddess. Yeah, usually it's connected to like polytheistic religions. All right, let's see. Okay, so yeah, there's a lot more questions. All right, so a lot of these questions already have answers attached to them. So a lot of you guys have been answering these questions, so that's awesome. And let's see. Okay, let me answer this one. Why does salvation cause the downfall of empires? So the reason why it causes the downfall of empires is because people will shift what they care about. Like it says, won't people work harder for salvation? Yes, but salvation is generally more like personal, like something you gain personally, right? So you need to like be a good person, but you don't necessarily have to go fight for your empire, right? So they're not connected. And so as long as people are more connected to like an afterlife, they're not going to be as connected to this life. So, okay. So I'll go through and answer any questions that I haven't yet or that aren't here. You guys did a great job asking some really awesome questions. So many that I'm not going to have time to answer all of them. But luckily, you guys are also awesome and have been answering each other's questions. So listen, so I know that, like, again, there are a lot of you guys that may already be members of Fiveable. And for those that aren't, just going to like plug this one more time, that the button that's there, replays and future live sessions, it just takes you to fiveable.me/live. And you can learn more about what becoming a Fiveable member means and what it includes. We're doing live sessions every week for AP World on Mondays. I'll be going over content. I'll be going over practice essays. With AP World, the essays themselves and writing is stressful, right? Like it's a lot. And so you got to be able to know how to get those points, and I can help you do that. And so that's something that we're going to do. We're going to do practice questions. And especially as we go further in the year, it's September right now. And so right now you might be thinking like, I got this, I'm going to be all right. As we go further in the year, there's more and more content, things get more stressful, and Fiveable is going to be here for you to help you out. I'm also going to do like study with me kinds of things, like helping you guys take notes, helping you just like be more prepared. Like, let me ask you a question. There are a lot more of you than are typing in the chat, but give me a number 0 through 5 of how stressed out AP World makes you. 0 is like not at all, you're chill. A 5 is like, I'm so stressed out. Look at this. So a 0 would be like, I'm chilling. This class is easy. A+. Look, over 9,000. Geez. 93. Okay, so you can see, this is a stressful class. Like some of you guys might be like, whatever, it's fine, it's easy enough, I'll figure it out. But for others, it's a hard class. I personally think the AP World is one of the hardest APs, just because there's so much content and there's so many skills to know, excuse me. And so that's why on my YouTube channel, I've got tons of videos for you, which a lot of you guys subscribe to tonight. And those videos are going to help you understand this content. That's why I'm going live every week. And then in the spring, more, because getting credit for this class, at least for this year, still counts for 2. So instead of just saving $4,000 for one class, you end up saving $8,000 for 2 classes. So you guys gotta take advantage of that. Yeah. So it's super intense, and I know that it's stressful, but it's really doable. And I think it's one of those things that is, I don't know, it just is like it. Yeah. I mean, they're going to split the class, whatever. Obviously, I was a big part of that whole thing, and that was a mess. But look, right now you can take advantage of this is in front of you, and you can pass. And I can help you do that. So check out Fiveable on the internet. Check out fiveable.me/live. It's $15 for the whole year, and that's only until Monday. So on Monday, it's going up. Okay, so it's gonna go up all year because more and more kids are gonna join, and I got to hire more teachers to do more. So that's it for tonight. Thanks for being here, and I hope that this was helpful for you. Just out of curiosity, are there any requests for next week? So I am planning on talking about religions next week. If you have any requests for things to talk about next week, that's fine. And also, guys, like, you know, if there's if there's anything that like if there's anything that you want me to talk about, I can talk about it. If you want these sessions to be different, let me know. These are for you. Like, these aren't for me. I'm not taking this test. So, you know, they're extra. They're just like, they're just to support you. And so, yeah, so it looks like you guys just want me to cover everything. Play Despacito in the background for the whole hour. Ugh, that would be too much. All right, so I'm glad that this helped you. And next week we're going to talk about, we'll talk about religion, and I'm not able to do DBQs. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'll for sure do belief systems. Greece, China. All right. Yeah. Yeah, you'll be all right. And we'll go over each one. Go more in detail about each individual empire. Yeah, so one of the things that you should know is that the reason why I focus a little bit more on like bigger picture stuff for this is like you can get really caught up in the details, like especially with the classical era, because there's so many different empires, and then you get really caught up in, and then you get confused by all the details. But if you hit it with a more like broader stroke, it gets easier. You know, like when you think about, when you go in to do, you know, when you go to read about Greece or Persia or Rome, and you're thinking about these like larger patterns, it's a lot easier to remember what happened in Rome, what happened in Greece, and it's a lot easier to see the connections between them because you're thinking more about like larger strokes, big patterns. So definitely approach this stuff with like big ideas, big patterns, especially like this unit. You know, at the end of the day, unit 1 is 5%, unit 2 is 15%, you know, so don't completely overwhelm yourself trying to remember every single person, date, name, everything. Think about patterns, focus on the big picture. That's where world history is a lot different than US history. You know, with US history, you're going to be a lot more about the like specific name, dates and stuff. But for world history, you can take a step back a little bit. So, all right. So thank you guys so much for coming. If you could, in the chat, if you could just give me a hit 1 if tonight was useful for you, and then I just know that it was helpful. And if it wasn't, you know, you can message me or email me and ask me for something else. And you can email me at hi@5volt.me. So sweet. See y'all later.